So, working remotely will mean that we're going to need to think even more carefully about building relationships with our colleagues. And there are lots of ways to do this, but I was thinking about three in particular to start with. First of all, we need to be aware immediately that the lack of face to face contact may give rise to misunderstandings and misinterpretations. So, we need to set ourselves up to mitigate that. And that leads me to my second point, which is to make sure that you're having regular scheduled check ins with your colleagues that are relational as well as practical. And one way to do this is to have an agenda that covers the topics that I'm going to go through now. Firstly, start with appreciations. What I really appreciate about your work, what I really appreciate about you in this situation goes a long way to building a sense of empathy, a sense of understanding, and we all really enjoy feeling appreciated. Knowing what someone else appreciates in us really helps to build our relationship, to allow us to feel like we're being seen, and to do that for someone else is really powerful, particularly if you're both doing it. Second on that agenda is new information. So things the other person may not know, even though we're assuming that they probably do. We need to really be careful about our assumptions in these times and really make sure that we're clarifying absolutely everything that the other person needs to know from a practical information perspective. Next, look at puzzles. Have Take some time to put on the agenda to discuss the puzzles that we are having, the things that we're having trouble working through. We might easily brush those over when we're working remotely as not important, but actually we need to deal with those. We need to air those, even though we may not have an immediate solution to them. But to allow to share those puzzles with our colleagues is really valuable. Next on that agenda is complaints and recommendations. So we're going to maybe have some points of stress, some points of tetchiness, and there may be some things that aren't working. So we need to be able to talk about those, but also and crucially how we'd like to address those things that we're complaining about, those things that we have an issue with. And lastly, do take some time in those conversations to talk about hopes and aspirations. Sometimes we find it hard to think beyond the situation that we're in, but actually keep thinking about these my hopes and aspirations, and talk about it with your colleague to keep up the relationship, but also to energize that relationship, to look to the future together. Lastly, really take time to listen to your colleagues as deeply as you possibly can, both in what they're saying and what they're not saying. Use deep listening skills, use open questions, take a little bit more time to clarify what you're hearing from the other person and whether that's actually what they're saying, so that we can keep building those relationships and overcome some of the challenges that we may have along the way. Thanks for listening.